share a very deep connection with this land. I'm very grateful to be joined today by Adam Northpagan, Chair of the Mountain Child Valley Society with Piikani First Nation of the Mountains Not Mines petition. For almost 2 years now, Alberta's Rocky Mountains and their critical watersheds have been under threat from the UCP's plans to open them up to coal mining. And Albertans are overwhelmingly opposed to this. An unprecedented coalition has emerged, including Indigenous leaders, municipal leaders, ranchers, environmentalists, country music stars, and many others. This issue has brought together rural and urban Albertans of all political stripes. And we don't want to see these distinctly Albertan landscapes torn apart. And we don't want our clean water with selenium or other byproducts of coal mining to be poisoned. Later today, I intend, as a result, to introduce Bill 201, the Eastern Slopes Protection Act. Now, you may remember that in April of last year, I introduced Bill 214, the Eastern Slopes Protection Act. And today's bill is the same. It's the same because the protections in this bill are just as necessary today as they were a year ago. My bill would do 4 things. First, it immediately cancels all exploration activities across the eastern slopes, which means a stop to road building and drill pits. Second, it permanently prohibits new coal mining and activities in Category 1 and Category 2 lands and cancels all existing coal leases on these lands. Third, the bill prohibits coal mining and related activities in Category 3 and 4 category lands, pending the completion of a thorough regional plan following extensive consultation with residents of the Eastern Slopes, Indigenous communities, elders, and communities, as well as municipalities, ranchers, farmers, agricultural groups, tourism and recreational businesses, and other economic sectors. The bill also prohibits the Alberta Energy Regulator from issuing approvals, including for water permits in Categories 3 and 4. And it cancels leases issued during the UCP's cancellation of the 1976 coal development policy in May of 2020, pending the outcome of the regional plan that I described. In short, the Eastern Slopes Protection Act does in law what the UCP and Sonia Savage have refused to do. It protects the Eastern Slopes and their watersheds, and it does so by law from the disfigurement and the pollution of coal mining. Protection through legislation, as opposed to ministerial order, is absolutely critical. The UCP has a report that clearly shows Albertans overwhelmingly oppose coal mining in the Eastern Slopes. But as we know, their recent response to that report is simply a ministerial order. And that's just not good enough. These orders can be rescinded at any time, literally with the stroke of a pen, after quiet meetings with coal lobbyists and UCP cabinet ministers. That's how this whole fiasco began in the first place, with the UCP quietly rescinding the 1976 coal policy late on a Friday afternoon before a long weekend. It is time to protect our mountains with a law. Albertans deserve no less. They do not trust the UCP to do it otherwise. And now I'll hand things over to Adam.
Okay, Nistu, Nidaniko, Adam Northpagan, Piikani. Good afternoon. I'm very pleased to be here with the leader, Alberta's NDP caucus, Rachel Notley, to talk about the importance of her private member's bill, Eastern Slopes Protection Act, that is so very important to the Indigenous people in Alberta. I am from the Piikani First Nation in the southwest corner of Alberta, and grassroots Piikani Nation members have been meeting regularly for the past 18 months to discuss the detrimental harms of open pit coal mining on the eastern slopes of the Rocky Mountains that will no doubt negatively impact ancestral lands to the Indigenous people in the province of Alberta. The Indigenous people have a strong connection to our traditional lands, as that is where we went for ceremony, hunt, gather, and collect our medicinal medicines. It has always been at the forefront of the Piikani Mountain Child Valley Society our outright opposition to any open pit coal mining along the eastern slopes, and we're adamant in our resolve. After more than a 4-month delay, the UCP government finally released its much anticipated Coal Policy Committee's final report on March 4th, 2022. And since that release, we, the Piikani Mountain Child Valley Society, remain cautiously optimistic as we welcome the halt of all new coal mining projects with the insertion of a ministerial order. However, we also know that a ministerial order can be revoked at any time, which does not bring a lot of reassurance to the First Peoples in the province of Alberta. In the southwest corner of the province, we have already seen the Grassy Mountain coal mining project rejected by the Joint Review Panel, the Government of Canada, and most recently, the Alberta Court of Appeal. That alone should send a strong message to Jason Kenney and Sonia Savage that coal mine is not to be developed along the eastern slopes. However, we doubt that the UCP government is willing to listen. It is for this reason that we wholeheartedly support Rachel Notley and the NDP private members bill on the Eastern Slopes Protection Act and encourage her to move forward with tabling it in the Alberta legislature this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adam. And now I'll invite Margaret to say a few words. Thank you.
Regardless of people's political stripe, thousands upon thousands of Albertans and other Canadians strongly oppose having coal exploration and open pit coal mine developments devastating Alberta's Rockies, Eastern Slopes, and our life-giving water. These summary statements are our key concerns. Eons in the making, mountains' complex interrelated ecosystems and biological diversity can never be truly reclaimed after a mountaintop or a mountainside has been blown up for an open pit coal mine. There will be endangerment to the wilderness and to wildlife. The release of selenium and other toxic substances, such as arsenic, into our freshwater systems is an inevitable and unavoidable consequence of open pit coal mining. Preventing leaching of selenium or capturing and treating selenium to this scale has never been successfully demonstrated, period. Climate change is real. In light of Alberta's recent heat waves, drought conditions, and wildfires, water allocation policy commitments should prioritize community and ecological health over commercial coal mines. Open pit coal mining requires the use of large volumes of fresh water. Furthermore, open pit coal mines and the related hazards and activities, such as clear-cut logging, will have a negative financial impact on sustainable industries, such as tourism, recreation, ranching, the film industries, green energy development, hunting, fishing, and agriculture. We risk losing so much. And for what? A sunset industry? Given that land use policies and regional land plans can be rescinded, it's more important than ever that we have a legislated act that will legally protect Alberta's Rockies, Eastern Slopes, and our life-giving headwaters.
And we'll go back to Rachel Notley to finish up.
We're done?
No, I just have a couple more comments.
Oh, okay.
Thank you so much, Margaret, for those comments. Before we take your questions, I just say a quick word on the process that's now in front of us. As I said last year, Bill 214 was introduced, and it was actually unanimously approved by the Private Members Bill Committee to proceed to second reading in the legislature. It was, in fact, the first opposition private members bill to be approved for such a conversation since the UCP had come into power and changed the rules. So today, I intend to seek unanimous consent from the legislature to advance this bill immediately back to that stage and essentially pick up where we left off when the legislature was prorogued. I'm very fortunate to be able to introduce this bill so early in the session, and there is no good reason why we can't, as a result, have this bill come to a final vote and have a thorough conversation about the permanent solutions to protecting our Rocky Mountains for all Albertans in the future going forward. So my call to all members of the legislature today is to let's accelerate this bill for a good, thorough conversation, and ultimately let us pass this bill and protect our eastern slopes by law. Thank you, and I'll be happy to take your questions, as will either Adam or Margaret. Thank you.
Well, I'll start with questions in the room.
I'm from Global. Rich, I want to start, we hear from the UCP government economic arguments for developments along the eastern slopes. What do you make of these economic arguments that they're making?
I would argue that the economic arguments against development of coal on the eastern slopes are far, far stronger. As we look forward to a diversifying economy, something that we know all Albertans want to see us move towards, something that this unfortunately this UCP government has been slow to act on. We know that the industries of the future actually require a clean water supply, and also, of course, a beautiful set of Rocky Mountains as far as it relates to tourism. So in the long term, the economic growth of the province is going to be stronger if we protect our watershed and protect the many different agricultural industries downstream, as well as protecting the multiple communities that are downstream. The economic cost of not doing that would far outweigh any economic benefit that would come from developing a coal mine.
The next question is for Adam. Adam, in your comments, you spoke about ministerial order is nice to see, but you'd like to see it in legislation because you don't trust the government, you don't trust the premier and the energy minister. Have you had conversations with them, assurances from them that this is the policy going forward? Where does that mistrust come from?
I think, historically when, the Indigenous people try to develop a relationship with, the government of Canada, government of Alberta, the issue of trust is always paramount, because of, the history of what has happened to our people, through oppression and colonization. And, the answer to your question is no. I have not had any discussion with, the Jason Kenney government. We have actually put out requests to meet with our local member of the Legislative Assembly who is part of the UCP caucus. And, for whatever reason, he has refused to come and meet with us, So that tells me that, when it comes to willingness, for Jason Kenney and Sonia Savage to listen to Albertans, it kind of begs to question whether or not they're very sincere about that. Thank you.
Any other questions in the room? And seeing none, we'll go to the phones. Just a reminder to press *9 if you're on the phone, raise hand if you're joining us via Zoom, and if you could say your name and your outlet at the top.
Hi, it's Bob Weber from the Canadian Press here. Can everybody hear me?
Sure can.
Okay, thanks. Ms. Notley, you're pretty clear on why you think a ministerial order is insufficient here. But other than that, your plan isn't that different from the UCP's proposal in that it relies on the completion of land use plans, and then we'll take it from there. I'm wondering why this legislation doesn't have any measures to speed up or enhance the creation of those land use plans, or if there are other measures your government or a government led by you would contemplate to do that.
Right. Well, I would say, first off, I think there is actually some difference between what the government claims it's doing through its ministerial order and what this act would do. The government's ministerial order appears in some levels, like in Category 2, for instance, to be more corralled by the AER process than it is by a comprehensive land review process. As an example, it also allows for approval to be given even without rescinding the ministerial order in some cases. So I would argue that our over globally, just the substance of what we're proposing is actually stronger, more evidence-based, and more comprehensive. Obviously, the other thing, though, and I just really can't emphasize this enough, Bob, is that a ministerial order can be changed overnight without any public oversight. Literally, you could have the UCP cabinet or a few of them sit down for a few Jamesons behind closed doors with coal lobbyists and change the order 5 minutes later. If it's in legislation, it has to come back into the House and it must be subjected to the light of day that is provided through our democratic process. So that is a fundamentally important difference. Now, you are right that the land use framework and land framework development process does need to be sped up on multiple fronts. It's been around for a long time. I think we're past a 10-year anniversary at this point. So we do know it needs to move faster. I would argue that that's a more ambitious effort, and I absolutely agree that we, as a province, need to put greater resources into that land use framework development regime so that we can move faster on these things. But this bill is focused solely on coal, and we were a little bit worried about having it get caught up in a whole round of other conversations. So that's why we haven't put the two together, although you're absolutely right that it should be paired with a commitment by the government to put more resources in and to move that land use framework development process along in a much more effective way.
Any follow-up, Bob?
I do. Just on the further theme of land use plans, the South Saskatchewan Regional Plan comes up for renewal in a year or two. Are you concerned that plan might be opened up a little early in order to maybe facilitate the development of a coal mine in that area?
Well, I think there's a whole number of things that this government could do in order to facilitate the development of a coal mine in that area. I think, quite frankly, the way it's structured, they don't actually need to do that. They just need to amend the ministerial order to allow for it to happen. So quite honestly, I suspect that rather than going into that process and opening themselves up to the legal challenges that would attract should they speed it up in order to facilitate coal development, it'd be a lot easier for them to just do the stroke of a pen and change the order. Or in some cases, they wouldn't even have to do that. They could just change their direction pursuant to RETA in certain categories. So that's the reason why we are concerned with the structure that they put in place, is that there really is no guarantee that, once they feel a little bit less political pressure, that they wouldn't go right back to where they were before.
We'll go to our next caller.
Hi, sorry, Janet French from the CBC. Rachel, how likely do you think it is? I mean, last time when the UCP said, oh, sure, yeah, we'll put your bill through to, second reading stage, they knew they were going to prorogue pretty soon. Mm-hmm. So it was a pretty low risk scenario, sort of legislatively. How likely do you think they actually are this time to allow your bill to go through, given that they believe they've taken steps with respect to coal?
Well, I think that a large number of members of the UCP caucus are fully aware that they enjoy some of the lowest trust numbers of any government in the province of Alberta's history for a very, very long time. And I think that a lot of UCP MLAs are also aware that huge numbers of their constituents are deeply concerned about their 11th hour backroom deal to try and open up coal mining in the Rockies. So I would certainly urge those UCP MLAs who are committed to actually representing the views of their constituents to seriously consider voting in favor of this bill. If they want us to accept the statement made by the Minister of Energy that they have answered the problem and that they have stopped development of coal in our Rocky Mountains, then they should simply make sure that the debate is closed by passing our bill. And if they choose not to pass our bill, then they need to understand that they will be sending a signal to all Albertans, including their many, many concerned constituents within UCP ridings, that the conversation is not over and that the possibility of coal mining in the Rockies remains alive.
Any follow-up, Janet?
Yeah, new topic. I just wanted to ask you about some of these proposed wage rollbacks by AHS with respect to Health Sciences Association of Alberta members, things like, 10% cut for social workers, dietitians, pharmacists, obviously different percentages for each of those. What goes through your mind when you see some of those proposals?
Well, I am deeply, deeply distressed on behalf of so many Albertans. And I will say this, Janet, I think that all Albertans, regardless of political stripe, have a strong sense of what's fair. And so when they see people like, for instance, respiratory therapists, whose sole job it is to keep people who are in the hospital with respiratory disease breathing, when they see those folks being told they have to take a 10% pay cut, the same time that this government is moving forward to give a 20 or 30% raise to AIMCO executives, I think most Albertans are going to be absolutely very much opposed to that kind of unfairness. The fact of the matter is our frontline healthcare providers have done double duty to be there for Albertans over the course of the last 2 years. And even as we come out of this pandemic, we need to make sure that we keep them working in what continues to be an overstressed healthcare system. And when you see this government proposing cuts of 10% to these people while proposing 20% hikes to well-paid upper-end executives, that says to me, that just goes against everything that's Albertan.
We'll go to our next caller.
Oh, hi, it's Catherine Krakowski with Alberta Today. In the government's announcement, there were 4 projects that are allowed to proceed through the regulatory process. What, if anything, does this bill do to those 4 projects?
What it does is it stops all work on them right now. And it prohibits that work until the land use framework and the land use plan development is absolutely completed. And so depending on where in the province that is, the timeline for that prohibition varies. In some cases, the first draft of the land use plan is not even complete. In other cases, it's being renewed. In all cases, it also requires an adequate level of consultation and accommodation with Indigenous Albertans who have a prior right to engagement on these kinds of decisions. So that's what's different in our case, is that it puts both our obligation to Indigenous Albertans and our obligations with respect to a comprehensive scientific environmental review ahead of any effort to further development.
Any follow-up, Catherine?
Yeah, a procedural question. In order to bypass the committee that studies private members' bills, would you have to bring in a motion, or how are you hoping to skip past that part?
It's a simple matter of seeking unanimous consent of the legislature. The legislature can waive its own rules anytime. We've done it a few times in the past, say, for instance, when we moved very, very quickly to pass the vaccine leave changes that we put in place, I think about a year ago or something like that. And this is the same thing. It's absolutely within the purview of the legislature. And given that this bill has been fully canvassed at that committee already, only a short time ago, last fall, it would seem somewhat cynical of the UCP to suggest that it has to go back there again. And rather, I think it's well positioned to enjoy the full attention of the legislature and debate at this point.
Do one more pass for questions. Star 9 if you're on the phone. Raise hand if you're joining us via Zoom. And seeing none, that's all for today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tens of thousands of Albertans have already provided their idea for how we can build Alberta's future. You can too by going to albertasfuture.ca.